Ready? Okay. Good morning. If everyone could take their seats so we can get started. Welcome to the Henry County Board of Commissioners call meeting reference the 2025-2026 millage rate. Today, Tuesday, August 19th, 2025. If everyone would stand so we can do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. I would like to ask for our tax commissioner, Commissioner Michael Harris, to please come forward, and our budget director, Benita Campbell, to come forward to begin the millage rate presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Commissioners, and pillars of the Henry County community. Today is our second millage rate discussion for 2025. Due to the main source of funding for the general fund and special service districts coming from the property taxes, I would like to share a few of the FY26 budget highlights to show what these funds will be used for. As a reminder, our FY26 General Fund and Special Service District budgets were adopted on May 28, 2025. Staff participated in several commissioner one-on-ones, as well as multiple discussions with county leadership to establish the board priorities for the FY26 fiscal year. Staff also held 2 budget workshops and 2 public hearings to gain additional feedback prior to adoption. Some of the budget highlights are listed here. The FY26 adopted General Fund and Special Service District budget is $287,797,000, which is up $28.1 million compared to the adopted FY25 annual budget. This represents a 10.8% year-over-year increase. Some of the key items that are included in the FY26 budget include, it's based on the current millage rate of 15.733 mills. It includes the following BLC priorities: road improvements, judicial expansion due to county growth, continued funding for public safety personnel and equipment, and county personnel compensation and benefits. It also includes funding for department essentials to maintain the current service levels. Finally, the adopted budget was not built based on the use of fund balance. Only available revenues are being used to fund projected expenditures. Finally, this slide is a graphical representation of how the FY26 budget is currently allocated. As you can see, over 50% of the budget covers public safety. Government operations represents about 16%, the judicial system represents about 11%, and public works is 6%. Now I will turn the presentation over to our tax commissioner, Mr. Michael Harris, who will carry you through the remainder of our millage rate presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Good morning again, Chair, Vice Chair, and board members. Again, as stated, this is the second of 3 public hearings regarding the setting of the millage for this year. I'll go through our standard presentation pretty quickly, just kind of go over again millage rate and what it actually represents. Millage rates are the tax rates used to calculate our local property taxes. The rate represents the amount a homeowner has to pay for every $1,000 of the property's assessed value. And the assessed value includes both the house itself as well as land on which it sits. Property value is determined by the tax assessors. The fair market value is rather determined by the tax assessor's office. Tax assessor's office mails out their assessment notices typically around April or May. And taxpayer has 45 days to appeal to the Board of Assessors. This year was a little bit different, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. A lot of that has to do with the new legislation that was passed with House Bill 581. Assessed value, as opposed to fair market value, is simply the fair market value multiplied by 40%. So The assessed value is actually what you are assessed on or taxed on, as opposed to your fair market value. So you always want to make that clarification. Again, as Ms. Campbell stated, right now the board is considering a millage rate holding fast at the 15.733 millage rate. And just run through a quick example of how county residents' taxes would be calculated based on that 15.733 millage rate. You can see up there the formula is relatively simple as stated. The assessed value, you take your fair market value, 40% of that is your assessed value, times minus any exemptions that may apply, times your millage rate, and that gives you your tax amount due. Run through a couple of quick examples. First example is a homesteaded property with a fair market value of $300,000. Again, times 40% would give you your assessed value of $120,000. Again, basic homestead would be an exemption for L1 would be an exemption amount of $15,000 would be removed and subtracted from your assessed value, giving you a taxable value of $105,000. That $105,000 times your millage rate of 15.733, or again, it represents $1,000 per $1,000 of an assessed value, so it's 0.015733, would yield a county tax of $1,651.96. We did this as a comparison from last year, from previously, or when we had made a change. But again, this is based on the standard L1 exemption. Now, taking that same property with a fair market value of $300,000 that is not homesteaded, again, it'd be the $300,000 times your 40%, which would give you your assessed value. However, because you are not homesteaded, you would not have that reduction of the $15,000 or more from your exemption. So you're, rather than being taxed at the $105,000 value, you'd be taxed at the full $120,000 value. So that $120,000 times your millage rate of 15.733 would yield a county tax of $1,887.96, a difference of about $236. And again, so that, bear in mind, that is just for your standard L1 exemption. There are other exemptions that apply. We'll get into that in just a minute. One of the biggest advantages that residents here in Henry County have is the provision for our frozen exemption. And what this does is, well, first, it was enacted back in 2004. If people remember, this was a time when home prices were rising exponentially. The board at the time made a determination to enact a provision to help principally with our senior citizens to freeze the value of the home based on the year they filed for and were approved for their homestead. Includes the primary residence and up to 5 acres of land. The base year value of the is the fair market value of their home from the year prior to the filing. So if you were to apply today for the homestead, your base year would be 2024. So it would be based on you'd be locked in at that 2024 valuation of your property. Exemption is automatically renewed from year to year. So there's as long as a resident continues to occupy their home as their primary residence, the homeowner pays on the base year value of the home on county and water portions of the tax bill, even if the value increases year over year. And again, it's important to note that. So if for some reason, we haven't seen this in Henry County in well over 10 years, but should the value go down below what your base year is, you would still only be billed at your lower value. So you're never penalized for having this frozen provision in place. And that's what that states. Some of the other exemptions that apply here in Henry County, again, and as stated, the L1 exemption is a standard county exemption, and that allows for, if you are a resident of the county, you own your home, you apply for and are approved for homestead, you automatically off the top get $15,000 reduced off of your assessed value. Additional age exemptions also apply here in Henry County. Beginning at age 62, you can get exemptions off of your school taxes, not the county portion, but your school taxes. And that begins at age 62, you get a $20,000 reduction from your assessed value. 65, that goes up to $80,000. Age 68 goes up to $120,000 reduced from your assessed value. And at age 70, you no longer pay any school taxes. Additional exemptions include disability, veterans, surviving spouse, conservation, Freeport, and a few others. Want to run through a quick example as it relates to going back to the frozen provision. We looked at a property with a fair market value of $252,000. Again, assessed value $101,000. And we broke up the portion of what the exemption amount versus what the frozen amount is. So the exemption is your base exemption amount, but your frozen amount kicks in when, so if the example I always give, if someone purchased their home in the year 2000 and it was valued at $200,000 at that time, fast forward to today at 2025, and that home is now valued at $400,000. On the county side, you are still only being taxed at the $200,000 value. And people often ask, well, where is that shown? Where is that reflected in the bill? The way you can always, the easy calculation is simply whatever your total exemption amount is, you subtract $15,000 from that, and that gives you your frozen exemption amount. So in this case, again, based on the year they purchased the home, they've already accumulated additional $24,000 in exemption. So it's a $24,800 in addition to the $15,000, that gives a total exemption amount. And the key, and we always share this with residents as they come in, you always want to look at your taxable value. This is the number that you're actually taxed on. So regardless of all the other numbers, the number you're, at the end of the day, you're taxed on, regardless of what the fair market value is, regardless of what the assessed value is. After that, you have to subtract all your exemptions, and that gives you your taxable value. So on your county taxes, and you'll notice for your county tax as well as your unincorporated and your special service districts on the county side, all those taxable values are fixed at $61,200. Yeah, this is from the 2023. They had the homestead tax relief grant in place. But fast forward to 2024, same property, that fair market value has now gone up to $382,000. But you'll notice the exemption amount remains fixed at the $15,000, our base level exemption. But your frozen amount has gone from $24,000 up to $76,000. To help offset that increase in value. So again, the important column being the taxable value, as you can see for the county taxes, that remains fixed at $61,200. So regardless of the valuation increase, even though the property value increased from $252 up to $382, on your county taxes, you're still being taxed at that same taxable value of $61,200. That's the benefits, that's the overarching benefit here in Henry County of having that frozen provision. Which goes back to some of the legislation that we're having to deal with this year. House Bill 581 was voted on and passed earlier this year, and what that called for was a statewide floating exemption. What that exemption provided for was for residents would have the option of, or counties and jurisdictions would have the option of opting in or opting out, and it would give citizens, it would in essence cap the value of the property increase. So again, here in Henry County, we've seen valuation increases anywhere from 5% to 12 into 20, 21%. The new legislation 581 would cap that based on the consumer price index, which typically ranges somewhere between 3 and 5%. So people would often call our office and ask, hey, is this something that's going to be good or beneficial from the county's perspective for as a resident? And I said, well, as a comparison, you'd want to compare either being capped at that 3% CPI based on the new legislation, or what you currently have in a homesteaded property here in Henry County, you're at 0% because, again, you're frozen, your valuation does not increase at all. So obviously that 0% is much more beneficial. But it also should be noted that even with that provision, as we're going through the process right now of calculating bills and running through the digest, the legislation requires that for every parcel that's out there, every parcel that gets calculated and considered, we also have to run an analysis to determine which is more beneficial for the resident, the current frozen provision that we have in place right now, or this new float option that the county did opt in for. And I would tell you, and it's kind of been confirmed by members of ACCG and GMA and others, that, and for Henry County's case, probably at 99.5% of the time, it's going to be the more beneficial result for residents is going to be our current frozen provision. Always like to include this slide where our tax dollars go. Roughly 50% of the taxes that are paid go towards school maintenance and operation. I will tell you that the school board did opt to reduce their millage slightly for the first time since 2007 at yesterday's meeting. So from 20 mills down to 19.8 mills. An additional 5% is applied to the school bond, which last year was reduced down to 2 mills. So 55% of your tax bill is represented by the school. Additional 5% was picked up by the water bond. That's the 2 mills for the water bond. And the remaining 40% with the 15.733 mills is attributed to the county for county services. The digest process, very much a collaborative process involving a number of entities, tax assessor's office, as well as our office, Board of Education, Board of Commissioners, our cities, and the Georgia Department of Revenue. The tax digest itself is simply a listing of all the assessments and assessments and exemptions consisting of real and personal property that we've been talking about, timber, mobile homes, motor vehicles as well as part of that digest, heavy-duty equipment, and public utilities. The digest must be approved by the State Department of Revenue before bills can be mailed out. Bills must be received 60 days in advance of the due date. Henry County typically mails our bills out by September 1st. We've been getting a lot of calls as of late asking about where we're going to be as far as tax due dates. We simply get them mailed out by September 1st, gives ourselves about a 2 to 3 week cushion. Tax bills have historically been due on November 16th every year. But I will tell you, and as I've said in the first meeting, this year is different. And we saw evidence of that during the assessment period when, based on the new legislation, the assessment process changed quite a bit. People saw changes to their assessment notices, and we got a lot of calls about it. And again, all of that was precipitated by the changes made that came about from House Bill 581. This year has been extremely challenging for everyone statewide. We continue to work with our vendors, with the state representatives. We were all on calls yesterday. I will tell you, Lynn and her team, I'm not sure if she's here today, her and her team, John Self and Cooper Keller and their team have been working nights and weekends to try and go through and perfect the digest. We're still in that process right now. Typically we'll kind of usually beyond that, but again, because some of the challenges that we've had, and I'll tell you, it's been, I attribute to the unintended consequences of legislation that we often see. But even the state officials, they've been scrambling trying to make interpretations. We still have some questions that we've posed up to the state we're trying to get clarification on. The DOR wasn't able to address the issue, so they've actually punted it up to the Attorney General's office. We're still waiting to get a determination from them. So again, this has been a far more challenging year this year based on some of the legislation requirements that came into play. However, that being said, we are still striving to make sure that we're still aiming to meet that same November 16th deadline. So that's still our goal, and we'll continue to strive. And should that change, we'll certainly let Ms. Matthews and board know as quickly as possible. Real quick, proposed millage rates, and I say proposed up there because only right now the county is the last one to set their millage. As it stands right now, the cities have and the school board have set their millage. The City of Stockbridge has confirmed they are set their millage at 3.77, which is the same as last year. City of McDonough has maintained theirs at 3.033, which again is the same as last year. City of Hampton has actually reduced their millage this year to 4.995, and the City of Locust Grove actually incorporated a city tax for the first time this year, and they passed a millage of 4.087. However, they're also offering a full exemption for residents, so residents could be 100% exempted in the City of Locust Grove, so they wouldn't feel the brunt of that. But you will see, based on the proposed millage rate of 15.733 for the county, that would actually yield a slight decrease in millage from last year to this year, and some of that can be attributed to the reduction from the school board. So again, that is one big positive that's coming out of this year so far. This is a sample of our property tax bill. You'll see additional information reflected on both the front and the back of our bills this year. That's for real property as well as for personal property. We're adding more information, make it a little more informative for our residents. As Ms. Campbell stated, this represents the second of 3 public hearings. The final hearing and adoption is scheduled for this evening at 6:30. And with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions or comments you may have.
Any questions from the board? Thank you, Commissioner Harris and Ms. Campbell for the presentation. This is a public hearing. If there's anyone wishing to come and speak, please come forward now. So having no one come forward, this ends the public hearing. And our upcoming meeting for adoption, as Commissioner Harris has said, will be on tonight at our 6:30. There will be another public hearing, and the board will decide to make a decision to adopt at tonight's meeting. If there's no other questions or comments from the board, this meeting is adjourned.